So what we're going to prepare is some naan bread. Okay, now this is early on in the day. We will be revisiting this evening to complete the naan bread, because naan bread takes a little while to rise, and unlike sort of like a loaf of bread, it can only improve by allowing it to prove. So we're going to make a basic naan bread, but we're also going to make some garlic naan and some Peshwari naan. So I'm going to prepare the Peshwari bit just after we've got our dough ready. Okay, now the garlic we will do when we're ready to cook the naan, and we'll finish off doing the naan at that later stage. So what we're going to do now is some naan bread. So we're going to need, obviously, to get some bubbles into our dough. Now traditionally they would have used live yogurt, and that could take many days of just resting it until it got going and fermented enough to get it aerated. So we're not doing that. We are going to add some yogurt to give it the flavour, but we're going to use some yeast. So before we start, I'm just going to take a small amount of warm water. Okay, so we don't want it too warm. I've got probably a couple of tablespoons there. I'm going to add in a teaspoon of sugar, a teaspoon of yeast, and we're just going to mix that up, and we're going to allow that to sit to one side and rise. Now in my bowl there, I've got 200 grams of plain flour. Okay, so I'm just going to put that there for a moment. So 200 grams of plain flour, and into that we're going to add half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of baking powder, and then a teaspoon of nigella seeds, sometimes known as black onion seeds. Okay, now if you don't have any of them, you can leave them out, but they do tend to give a bit more of the authentic sort of naan flavour. Now I'm just going to mix these together. Now this is following a traditional recipe from the Punjab, northern region of India. Well, I said Italy then. Okay. And like I say, normally obviously there wouldn't be yeast in it, but we're going to add that yeast. We're going to give it a little bit longer. So I've just mixed them two together. Now the only other ingredients you're going to want is some oil, some plain vegetable oil, and some natural yogurt. Now you might want some milk if the dough is too thick, and we just add a little bit of milk until it's just the right consistency, or if on the other hand it is too wet, we obviously don't put milk in it, we put some more flour in it, and then we'll just go into sort of like knead it gently as we go, not like knead it like as in bread on here, just knead it gently together, and then we're going to leave it to prove to this evening. So we'll come back when that yeast got going. So my yeast has already started to froth up a bit, so we're going to add that in to that flour mix, and then we're going to take our natural yogurt and we're going to add 2 tablespoons of that. Like I say, this isn't to get it proving, this is more to give it that sort of flavour. And then the other thing we're going to do is add a tablespoon of oil. Okay, so plain oil, I've got here sunflower oil, I think it is, but just some sort of non-flavoured, if you like, oil. Just put the lid on that before anything happens to it, and then we're just going to mix all that in, and then in a minute I'll get my hand in there and we'll give it a good old kneading, mixing together, make sure it's all thoroughly mixed in. So there's my dough. Added about a tablespoon and half, or just over a tablespoon and a half of extra milk, because it wasn't doughy enough to begin with. Now what we're going to do is we're now going to put it by to rise, but what I'm going to do before I do that, I'm just going to brush it over with a little bit of oil, because while it's proving, we don't want it sort of drying it with like a skin on top. So I'm just going to give it a little coating of oil, and then we're going to cover that over, and like I say, we're now just going to put it and allow it to rise until we're ready to actually make the naan breads. Now to make the naan breads, we'll be rolling it. Two of them would, well, if we make some plain, it'll just be rolled. If we stuff it, it will be with garlic or Peshwari. We're going to make the Peshwari filling in a second. But all you're going to need, other than something to roll it with, is essentially a hot pan to cook one side on, and then the grill to cook the other. But we'll worry about that when we come to it. So just going to put this to one side somewhere warm, and then we'll make the Peshwari filling. So the Peshwari filling is going to be basically pistachios, raisins and a little bit of sugar. So for that we're going to need a little blender, okay, which I've got here. And so in there I've got a generous teaspoon of ordinary sugar, okay, and then I'm going to want to put in there sort of 2 or 3 teaspoons worth of raisins, and same amount of pistachios. I think there's a few more raisins in there. Now what we're going to now do is we're going to just basically grind this up into finish powder. But there you go, that's the kind of texture I'm sort of looking for. And so all we're going to do now is we're just going to put that to one side, just cover that up, and then later we'll be using that to make some Peshwari naan. So we want to make some garlic naan. So we've got our Peshwari mix made up, we want to do some garlic naan. So for that I'm going to take some ghee, okay, and I'm just going to, when it decides it wants to behave itself, add that to my saucepan, and then I'm just going to heat that up. And I've got quite a lot of garlic there that I've chopped up finely, and what we're going to do is we're just going to, I didn't realise I left that ring on. What we're going to do is just going to fry this up, and then that will be ready to do our garlic naan. Okay, so here's our dough from before. Okay, actually despite covering it up or coating it with some oil, it has actually formed a little bit of a skin on it. Okay, gone a little bit dry on top. So I'm just going to knead that for a bit, and I might moisten it down a little bit with a little bit of milk, just to make it a little bit more of a pliable dough, I think. So there's my dough. Okay, I've got a floured surface here, and what we're going to do now is we're just going to divide this up, and we're going to make 4 naans. Okay, so I've divided that up to 4. Just going to roll these into some balls. Now remember, we're making some garlic naan and some Peshwari naan. Now you could make plain naan, in which case you just roll it out like we're going to roll it out, but because we're not, because we're doing these stuffed ones, if you like, we're going to stuff them first. So my garlic is nicely cooking there, so I think we'll leave that cooking a little bit more, and what we'll do is we'll start with our Peshwari. So I'll take one of my balls, okay, and I'll just flatten it out to a bit of a disc, and I'll take some of my Peshwari mix. About if I take that off first, wouldn't it? Let me get a teaspoon, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of that and I'm just going to add that little pile into the middle. Okay, and then what we do is we're going to pull in all the way around the sides so that we thoroughly encased that into that dough, and then giving it plenty of flouring. I'm just going to roll this out into your typical elongated, I think that garlic's had enough, so I'm just going to turn that off, elongated naan shape. Now the nigella seeds we add will give you that sort of flavour typical of a naan bread. Okay, but we'll try and roll it so we don't split it until the insides come out, but equally we want it nice and thin. So that's our first Peshwari one done, so I'm just going to do exactly the same with the other one. So to make our garlic naan, we'll do exactly the same thing again. Okay, we just squeeze our ball out into a bit of a disc, and then we take some of our roasted garlic. Now what we really want is just the garlic, that doesn't mean to say that we won't use that lovely garlic flavoured butter. Okay, that will be reserved, and what we can do with that, but well, actually there's two ways you can make these garlic naans. One is like we're doing, where we're going to encase the garlic inside, even though this is a little bit more tricky because any butter on there does try to leak out. You can either do it like this, and then after you've cooked it, pour some of that butter on top just to, you know, give that extra flavour, or just have to get a bit more flour on there because we've got some garlic and butter on there, or instead of stuffing it with the garlic, the other way of doing it is literally just pour it on top after you've cooked it. So you just cook it like a plain naan, and then pour garlic and garlic butter over top. So I've got one more to do, and then we'll cook cooking them, and there is a way in which we need to cook them. So to cook the naan, you would traditionally have really just like a very flat frying pan. I think they call it a tava or something like that, but essentially it's just a flat plate, like a, well, not a griddle plate because that's usually like ridged in it, and you get that really hot, and then you place the, no, I'm going to call it pita bread then, looks a bit like pita bread, doesn't it? We place the naan onto that, and we cook it for 1 or 2 minutes until it's got that characteristic browning, and you'll also see it start to puff up. Now, hopefully we can see that, but at the moment I've only just put the heat on. I've also got the grill on because you don't flip it and cook both sides. These are normally cooked in a traditional clay tandoori oven, and with the tandoori, to cook it, you basically would slap the meat or the pita bread on the side inside of it, where it then cooks that side of it like we're going to do on that pan, and then when that's cooked it falls off into the hot coals at the bottom, which cooks the other side. Now we haven't got a tandoori oven, and I thought they're just simple little thing you put on your hob. No. So we're not using the proper oven. We're doing it on that. So we're going to do it on that one side, and then we're going to put it onto a tray, and we're going to cook the top side on, under the grill. So I'm going to start by doing my Peshwari. So just put that onto there. Okay, I'm not sure if that's quite hot enough yet, but that should start cooking, and what we should see is it start to bubble up. And we should see start to bubble up. Right, it hasn't obviously bubbled as much, but I think that's probably because the pan was bit cold, but if I just flip that up, you can see it looks like a naan bread. So I'm just going to lay that onto that sheet, and we're going to put that under the grill for about 2 minutes. And in the meantime, I'm then going to slap the next Peshwari one on there. Okay, so there's my Peshwari naan. Let's just break that one. It's still quite hot, so it's probably going to be bloody hot inside. Definitely got the sweetness that you normally get with it. That'll be some sugar and raisins. Wouldn't say it's overly crunchy from the nuts, but definitely tastes like the Peshwari that I've had before. So there's the garlic one, and what I'm going to do with this, I don't want to make it too too much of a mess to eat, so I'm just going to sort of lightly brush over a little bit of garlic and butter from in there, and then just we'll literally just take this out the grill. But I might get that bit in there. Let's just see. A little bit drier. Definitely garlic. Perhaps a little bit too overdone, this one. Let me just check this one in for that. Yeah, I think this is perhaps just a little bit overdone, this one. This one's a little bit crispy, a little bit crunchy. Yep, but definitely garlic. So, that's our Peshwari naan, our garlic naan.